There comes a moment in every life when we realize love is not guaranteed, affection is not owed, and sometimes the ones we love do not love us back. But this revelation is not a tragedy, it is an awakening. Because the deepest wounds do not come from being unloved, they come from staying where love does not live. To free yourself from those who don't love you is not cruelty, it is salvation. Unreciprocated love is one of the most haunting experiences a soul can endure, not because of the rejection itself, but because of what it awakens within us. When someone does not love us back, we are thrust into confrontation with the parts of ourselves we have ignored, rejected, or tried to bury. The ache is not merely about their absence, it is about the exposure of the unconscious. This pain reveals what has been hidden: the longing for validation, the inherited fear of abandonment, the compulsive desire to prove our worth. We are not just grieving their absence, we are grieving the collapse of a fantasy. We are grieving the illusion that love could fix what was broken long before they entered our lives. In truth, the one who does not return your love becomes a symbol, not an enemy, not a villain, but a mirror polished by fate, held up by destiny, reflecting not just the pain they cause, but the wounds that were already within you. Their silence speaks a forgotten language, the language of your earliest unmet needs. Their indifference does not only feel personal, it feels ancient, ancestral. It echoes with the weight of every moment you've ever felt unseen, unchosen, unworthy, and yet we often chase them harder. We plead, we shrink. We adapt ourselves to their absence in the hope that if we just become someone else, they will finally turn around and offer the love we so freely gave. But this pursuit is not about love. It is about the shadow, that secret, wounded part of the psyche that cannot believe it deserves love without sacrifice, without suffering, without the slow erosion of self. The shadow is cunning. It tells us that their neglect is our fault, that if we were just better, quieter, prettier, smarter, more patient, then maybe they would stay. But the truth is this: the shadow does not want love. It wants familiarity. It wants to replay the pain it knows. Because to the unconscious, pain is safer than the unknown, and so we stay not because of love, but because the shadow is afraid to heal. We return again and again to the one who withholds affection, not realizing we are not trying to win their heart, we are trying to rewrite our story. We are attempting to reverse the verdict passed down in childhood, that we are not enough. But no person, no matter how magnetic, mysterious, or emotionally distant, has the authority to rewrite that story for you. Unreciprocated love, then, is not just emotional disappointment. It is an initiation, a summoning, a sacred encounter with the self, asking, why do I chase what harms me? Why do I romanticize absence? Why do I abandon myself to be accepted by another? And these questions, these dark, unraveling questions, do not arise in the light. They are born in the shadow, in the quiet, unspoken spaces between longing and loss. The danger of staying where love is absent is not just emotional neglect, it is the slow, quiet erosion of the very essence of who we are. Every time we surrender our dignity, our boundaries, and our soul to someone who cannot give us love in return, we are not just tolerating a lack of affection, we are betraying ourselves. Self-betrayal does not always appear as an obvious or violent act. It is subtle, insidious, and often wrapped in the guise of self-sacrifice, loyalty, or endurance. We tell ourselves that by staying, we are showing strength, patience, or grace. But what we are truly doing is abandoning the deepest truths of our own hearts. When we stay with those who do not love us, we are compromising our own integrity not out of love, but out of fear. Fear is the silent architect of self-betrayal. The fear of being alone, the fear of rejection, the fear of the unknown. So we tell ourselves that if we just give a little more, try a little harder, stay a little longer, they will change. We tell ourselves that love is a labor, a sacrifice, a test of our devotion, but what we are truly sacrificing is our own peace, our own sense of self, our own joy. The longer we remain, the more we deny ourselves the opportunity to experience love that is free and unconditional, the kind of love that only appears when we stop trying to force it from the wrong places. This betrayal of the self begins subtly. It starts with the quiet whispers in your mind, the small compromises you make to stay in someone's world, the moments when you feel a pang of discomfort but ignore it. It begins with the way you silence your inner voice when it calls for a different path. You make excuses. They are just having a hard time. They don't know how to love. I can't be too demanding. You diminish your own needs in order to avoid the discomfort of confronting the truth. They cannot love you, and they never will. But this internal negotiation with yourself, this constant rationalizing of their indifference, is not self-love. It is self-erasure. It is you, piece by piece, fading into someone else's idea of who you should be. And what happens over time is that you become invisible even to yourself. You no longer know where your boundaries lie because you've erased them for so long. You no longer recognize your own needs because you have ignored them in favor of theirs. The cost of self-betrayal is not just emotional. It is spiritual. The longer you stay in a relationship where your love is not returned, the more you begin to doubt your own worth. You convince yourself that if you are not worthy of love from them, you may not be worthy of love at all. And in doing so, you trap yourself in a cycle of proving your value to those who will never see it. But the most dangerous consequence of self-betrayal is the loss of your own soul's voice. When you keep choosing to remain where love is withheld, you become disconnected from the truth of who you are. Your soul, which once cried out in defiance, in joy, in hope, becomes quiet. It becomes muffled. It no longer speaks to you with the urgency it once did, because you have taught it that its needs don't matter, that the truth of who you are isn't worth protecting. And in that silence, the inner call to freedom, to authenticity, to wholeness, becomes more and more distant. The person who is meant to fulfill your soul's potential, you fades into the background. You become nothing more than a shadow of yourself, living for someone else's approval, for their love that can never be earned, never realized. So, ask yourself, at what point does your sacrifice stop being an act of love and become a surrender to the death of your own spirit? The act of staying in a loveless relationship is not merely a passive act, it is an active decision to turn away from your own truth. It is a denial of your needs, a rejection of your worth, a dismantling of your personal integrity. And this is a dangerous thing because it sets a precedent. It teaches your unconscious mind that it is acceptable to put others above yourself even when those others are incapable of offering you what you deserve. Self-betrayal is not a one-time event. It is a repeated pattern, often carried out in silence. But every time you betray yourself, a part of your soul becomes hardened, as if building walls to protect itself from the pain of rejection. And before long, these walls become impenetrable. Your heart becomes a fortress, and the walls you built to protect yourself become the very thing that keeps love out. Not just love from others, but love for yourself. Our attachment to others is rarely as simple as love. It is often a reflection of unconscious patterns formed from the very moment we began to understand connection. These patterns, woven into the fabric of our psyche, are archetypal. They are timeless, universal, and rooted in the very core of our being. We are not simply drawn to others because of who they are in the present, we are drawn to them because of who we have always been in relation to love, loss, and longing. These archetypes do not originate in the conscious mind. They emerge from the deepest recesses of the unconscious, from early experiences, ancestral histories, and the emotional blueprints left behind by our formative relationships. And so we find ourselves unconsciously recreating familiar dynamics, hoping this time they will lead to something different, something better, something healed. The first archetype that often emerges in the dynamic of unreciprocated love is the wounded child. This part of us is constantly seeking the love and validation that was never fully given in our early years. It is a part of us that believes love is conditional, that we must prove our worth before we can be loved. The wounded child does not believe in unconditional love, only in the love that is earned through sacrifice, compliance, or striving. When we stay in relationships where love is not returned, it is often this inner child that is reaching out, not knowing that it is not love being given, but a repetition of unmet needs. We may feel drawn to people who mirror the absence of parental love, those who are distant, emotionally unavailable, or incapable of seeing us fully. This pattern is not random. It is an unconscious attempt to heal old wounds, to fill the void left by neglect, to convince ourselves that we are worthy of love, even if we have to struggle for it. But the more we pursue these connections, the more we repeat the cycle. The wounded child believes that through enough effort, enough patience, enough devotion, the love will eventually come. But this is a false hope. It is an illusion created by the unconscious mind to soothe the deep pain of feeling unworthy. Another archetype at play in loveless relationships is the martyr. The martyr sacrifices their own needs, desires, and sense of self in the name of love. They believe that love is a sacrifice, that to love another is to lose oneself in service to them. The martyr often feels noble, even righteous, in their willingness to endure hardship and neglect for the sake of another's happiness. The martyr tells themselves that their suffering is justified, that it will eventually be rewarded. However, the martyr's attachment is not based on true love, but on a need to feel needed. The martyr attaches to those who are emotionally distant because in their mind they must rescue or save the other person. This gives them a sense of purpose, of value, but it also denies them the opportunity to receive love in return. The martyr believes that to be loved, they must first prove themselves indispensable. But the truth is that the martyr's love is not unconditional. It is conditional upon sacrifice, and no true connection can flourish when one person is constantly sacrificing their own soul for the other. Then there is the rescuer archetype. The rescuer is the person who enters relationships with the unconscious hope that they can fix the other person. This archetype often appears in romantic relationships where one partner is emotionally unavailable or broken in some way. The rescuer is attracted to these individuals, believing that by saving them, they will earn love, approval, and affection. The rescuer is often blind to their own needs, focusing only on the needs of the other person. They sacrifice their own emotional health in the hope that their love and care will bring the other person back to life. However, the rescuer's love is not a healing love, it is a codependent love. It is based on the idea that the other person is broken, incomplete, or unworthy of love without the rescuer's intervention. This dynamic fosters imbalance. The rescuer is left empty, longing for affection that they cannot receive, while the person they are trying to save remains distant, unable to return the love in the way the rescuer needs. All of these archetypes, the wounded child, the martyr, the rescuer, are not conscious choices we make. They are deeply ingrained patterns formed by early attachments, by familial dynamics, and by the unconscious messages we absorbed about love and worth. And they all lead us into attachment patterns where love is not truly given or received. We find ourselves in relationships that drain us, that hurt us, that keep us perpetually on the edge of emotional starvation. But we must ask, why do we keep choosing these patterns? Why are we so often drawn to people who cannot love us in return? The answer is rooted in the unconscious drive to resolve unfinished business. We are not seeking true love. We are seeking to replay our old stories, the stories that once kept us trapped in the belief that we were unworthy, unlovable, or destined to be abandoned. Our unconscious minds are trying to resolve these old patterns to make them turn out differently this time. However, healing cannot occur through repetition. It cannot occur through the retelling of the same painful narrative. True healing, true freedom, occurs only when we bring these unconscious patterns into the light, when we make the unconscious conscious and begin to choose consciously. The wounded child needs to be nurtured, but not by someone who cannot love them. The martyr needs to understand that love is not about sacrifice, but about mutual giving. The rescuer needs to realize that true love cannot be earned through fixing others. It is only possible when we learn to love ourselves first. Individuation is not simply a process of personal growth. It is a process of becoming. It is the soul's journey toward its fullest expression, the path toward authenticity, towards the integration of all the fragmented parts of ourselves. But what many fail to realize is that individuation requires something fundamental: separation. This separation is not merely physical. It is emotional, psychological, and spiritual. To become whole, we must separate from that which diminishes our wholeness, from those who cannot love us, from those who do not see us, from the relationships that keep us bound in illusions of attachment. Separation is not a punishment, it is a liberation. It is the soul's call to leave behind the personas, the roles, and the relationships that no longer serve its growth. It is the act of saying no to what drains us and yes to what elevates us. And though the ego may resist clinging to familiar patterns, to old habits of attachment, to the comforting numbness of emotional dependency, the soul knows that this separation is essential for the evolution of the self. To individuate is to confront the truth of who we are, without the shadows of others' expectations, judgments, and projections. And that truth is often hidden beneath layers of conditioning, beneath the false identities we have created to survive in the world. These false identities are often formed in response to early attachments, to our primary caregivers, and to the relationships we formed in childhood. These identities serve as a defense mechanism against emotional pain, against the fear of abandonment, against the fear of being unloved. But as we grow older, these defenses become prisons. We become trapped in roles that do not serve us: the role of the caretaker, the role of the martyr, the role of the fixer. We begin to live not as our true selves, but as versions of ourselves that we believe others need us to be. And so we enter into relationships where our true essence is never fully seen, never fully loved. Instead, we are loved for who we are pretending to be, for the role we are playing. The act of separation from these relationships is the act of shedding the false self. It is the moment when we refuse to stay in a relationship that asks us to be less than we are. It is the refusal to play the part of the rescuer, the healer, the martyr, the child, or the fixer. It is a profound act of self-honoring. To individuate, we must let go of the relationships that keep us stuck in our old, unconscious patterns. The people who cannot love us, the ones who cannot see us, are often not the problem. They are simply the vehicle through which we encounter our own limitations. We may love them, we may desire their affection, but their inability to love us does not diminish our worth. It simply highlights the need for us to step away, to stop seeking validation where it cannot be found. The truth is that by staying, we are not only preventing their growth, but we are preventing our own. Separation does not mean abandoning love or rejecting connection. It means that we are choosing to love ourselves first, to honor the sacred space within that can no longer tolerate the degradation of staying in a relationship that is not reciprocal. To become whole, we must separate from those who deplete our energy, from those who cannot meet us in our full depth, from the attachments that ask us to abandon our truth. Individuation requires that we break free from the roles and personas we have adopted. It is only when we step outside of the relationship dynamics that bind us to these false identities that we can begin to experience who we truly are. Separation allows us the space to breathe, to grow, and to hear the quiet whispers of the soul whispers that have long been drowned out by the noise of emotional dependency and attachment. When we separate from those who cannot love us, we also begin to separate from our old fears. The fear of loneliness, the fear of rejection, the fear of never being enough. These fears are deeply ingrained within us, often born out of childhood wounds and unmet needs. But by stepping away, by making the conscious decision to walk away from relationships that do not nourish us, we begin to reprogram these fears. We teach ourselves that we are enough, that we are worthy of love that is mutual, unconditional, and nourishing. Separation is not an act of giving up. It is an act of becoming. It is an act of embracing the unknown, of choosing the path that may be difficult, but that ultimately leads to our deepest expression. It is the act of trusting that the universe, in its infinite wisdom, will bring us the connections we need once we step into the fullness of who we are. The relationships that we need, the ones that will reflect our worth, will only come when we stop clinging to those that keep us small. Individuation requires courage, the courage to stand alone, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to embrace the unknown. It requires us to let go of the familiar, to say goodbye to what we have known, and to trust that something better, something truer, is waiting for us on the other side. In this process, we are not just separating from others, we are separating from our own illusions. We are letting go of the story we have told ourselves, the story that says we are unworthy, the story that says we must earn love, the story that says we are destined to be incomplete. To individuate is to separate from these stories, to let go of the emotional weight they carry, and to step into the truth of our own being. The journey of love is not external. It begins deep within the recesses of our own hearts. We cannot truly give love to others if we do not first offer it to ourselves. This may sound like a simple statement, but it is profound in its implications. To love ourselves is not a mere act of self-acceptance or self-esteem. It is an act of honoring the essence of who we are, of recognizing our own intrinsic worth, regardless of external validation or the approval of others. We live in a world that often teaches us to seek love outside of ourselves. From the earliest days of childhood, we are conditioned to believe that love is something that must be earned, that it is something we must seek from others in order to feel complete. Society tells us that love is found in the approval of others, in romantic relationships, in the validation of friends, family, or social media. We spend our lives chasing this external love, believing that it will fill the void within us, believing that the love we receive from others will somehow heal our wounds, mend our brokenness, and complete us. But the truth is that external love is not a remedy for internal emptiness. It is a reflection, a mirror of the love we have already cultivated within. If we do not love ourselves, no amount of external affection can make us feel truly loved. We may find comfort, pleasure, or even temporary fulfillment in relationships, but we will always return to the same feeling of lack if we have not first learned to love ourselves from the inside out. This is where the journey of individuation, the path of self-realization, becomes crucial. To individuate is to come into alignment with our true selves, to shed the layers of societal conditioning and unconscious patterns, and to discover the authentic self beneath the surface. This process is not always comfortable. It often requires us to confront the parts of ourselves that we have hidden, the parts we may feel ashamed of, or the parts that society deems unworthy or unlovable. Yet, it is precisely in embracing these shadow aspects of ourselves that we begin to cultivate real love. Real love is not just about accepting the parts of ourselves that we deem good or worthy. It is about embracing all aspects of ourselves, even the dark, flawed, and imperfect parts. Real love is an unconditional love for the self, one that transcends judgment, fear, and criticism. It is the love that says, "I am enough just as I am," without the need for external validation or approval. The truth is, we are not broken. We are not incomplete. We are whole exactly as we are. And the only thing standing in the way of our experiencing this truth is the belief that we are not. When we learn to love ourselves fully, we stop searching for love in places where it cannot be found. We stop chasing people who are incapable of loving us the way we deserve to be loved, and instead, we begin to cultivate relationships that reflect our true value. But self-love is not always easy. It is a practice, a commitment. It requires us to unlearn the habits of self-criticism, self-doubt, and self-rejection that have been ingrained in us for years. It requires us to shift our inner narrative, to stop believing that we are unworthy of love, that we must prove ourselves in order to be loved, that we must change who we are to meet someone else's expectations. Self-love is the radical act of choosing ourselves, of placing our own well-being, happiness, and peace at the center of our lives. It is about setting boundaries, speaking our truth, and taking care of our physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. It is about giving ourselves permission to say no when something does not serve us, and yes to the things that nourish our soul. When we love ourselves, we no longer need the approval of others to feel worthy. We stop seeking validation in unhealthy relationships or through external accomplishments. We understand that our worth is not determined by what others think of us, or by how much we give, or how much we please others. Our worth is intrinsic, innate, and undeniable. We are worthy of love simply because we exist, and that love must begin within. True self-love also involves self-forgiveness. We all have made mistakes, we all carry regrets, and we all have moments in which we have hurt others or been hurt ourselves. But the path to love requires that we forgive ourselves for these transgressions, and that we understand that our past does not define us. We are not our mistakes, we are not our failures. We are the sum of our experiences, our lessons, and our growth. And we are worthy of love precisely because we have the courage to face our imperfections and continue on the path of growth. In the process of learning to love ourselves, we also learn to release the need to control how others love us. We stop trying to mold ourselves into someone else's image of perfection. We stop molding ourselves into someone who fits the narrative of another person's desires. When we love ourselves, we stop trying to meet the unrealistic expectations that others place on us, and instead, we begin to live authentically true to who we are, to our desires, to our needs. This shift in consciousness, this inner revolution, is essential for any healthy relationship. When we love ourselves first, we attract people who love us in the same way. We attract people who honor our boundaries, who support our growth, who see us as equals and partners. We no longer need to chase love, because we realize that love begins and ends with us. We are the ones we have been waiting for, and yet self-love is a journey, not a destination. It is a lifelong process of healing, of learning, of growing into the fullest expression of who we are. There will be times when we fall back into old patterns, when we feel unworthy or inadequate, when we question our value. But the key to self-love is not perfection, it is perseverance. It is the willingness to continue choosing ourselves even when it feels difficult, even when the world tells us otherwise. When we choose to love ourselves, we stop seeking approval outside of ourselves, and we begin to trust our own inner wisdom. We stop allowing others to define our worth, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the chains of codependency, from the need to please others, from the fear of being alone. Love, then, is not a commodity to be found in others. It is an energy, a force that exists within us, and once we realize this, we no longer need to search for it externally. We become it. We become the embodiment of love.